Hey everybody, welcome back. That was a super exciting trailer. I can't wait to watch the film tonight. And I also want to give a big thanks to our next guest, Nancy Springer, who is the author of Enola Holmes. Nancy's written a 6-book series about Sherlock Holmes's younger sister, which has garnered a lot of attention and led to this special Netflix film. And Nancy, do you have a copy you can hold up for us?
Absolutely. How's that?
That is a lovely cover. Yeah.
It's the special Netflix cover. They've got a little logo there, and they put Enola's name in big letters.
Oh,
So
cool. Well, it looks great. I hope everyone reads it and watches the film.
we don't have the movie poster cover, but in some other countries we do.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, we all just watched the trailer, and it is, let me think, just vigorous with adventure, I think. There's an adventure in like every film frame. So I'm curious, as an author who was just immersed in writing this series and researching it, how did it feel to watch your words and your story come to life on the screen? I bet that must have been really interesting.
I haven't actually seen the whole film yet. I'm
Oh,
not going to see it until you do, until everybody does.
okay. Well, what do you think of the trailer then? Was that interesting?
I love it. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a great trailer. And
Yeah.
it has that semi-humorous mood that I adore. That this is not going to be a deep, dark, gloomy sort of event here. This is going to be fun.
Cool. I can tell. Every film frame is just like pulsing with action, and I love the humor. I love the way that the trailer ends with "You don't know embroidery." That was
Yes,
great. Well, hey, I've read that early on in life you lived in a sort of Eden that was, somewhat similar to Enola's environment, I think. You lived near a brook and a river, and you played amid wildflowers and willows and discovered herons and hawks. And you wrote, "Until I was 13, I ran like a freckled fawn where the owls lived, where the wild flocks grew, where sometimes frogs could be caught." This sounds lovely and adventurous, and I'm so curious if your early life of running free in the forest informed Enola at all. She's obviously disposed for an adventurous life outdoors, and she even called a wild child.
absolutely. Yes, totally. In many, many ways, Enola is me. I didn't realize that until after the first book manuscript was turned in, but I wondered, I had such terrible butterflies turning that manuscript in. And I thought, why? And then I realized that I had invested myself even more than usual in the book. Yes,
Interesting.
Enola are us.
Well, that's really interesting, Nancy. And to loop back to another adventure, the adventure of writing and reading, I'm curious, who were you as a writer and a reader when you were young and living in this Eden?
I would read everything. I don't know where my parents got all the books because honestly, this was back in the 1950s. There were no bookstores. There was no Walden Books or Borders or anything like that. Yet somehow my mother and my father had shelves and shelves full of all kinds of books, and I just was anything I wanted to read, I just grabbed. If it was too old for me, I found out soon enough.
Wow. So you were living in just an idyllic space in some ways. You're making it sound like you had
In
this.
some ways, yes. Of course, I was the kid who got picked on at school. That part wasn't good, but the home life was pretty darn good. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds very nice to have all the outdoors activities and the reading. And there's a line in the trailer where Enola's mother says there are two paths she can take: the path she chooses or the path others choose for her. And the path of being a writer is rarely one that others choose for us. So can you tell us more about how you chose the path of being a writer?
It more or less just happened. When I was raised in the 50s and later my teenage years in the early 60s, girls were either going to be a teacher, a librarian, a beautician, a nurse, or I think I'm missing something or other. But there were few choices. And I wasn't really expected to choose. My parents more or less assumed that I would be a school teacher, and that they would send me to teachers college and that I would become a school teacher. I had other ideas, but I didn't know what to do about them. What I actually ended up doing was marrying while still in college. And then after college, um, I was so filled with daydreams that I thought as if I have to offload them. And I started to write, but not with any serious intentions of being a writer. It was just something I did. Like some people crochet, I write.
Interesting. So how did you go from that place of being a kind of crochet type writer, hobbyist writer maybe, to becoming the author of, I think you've written 50 books, something like that?
Like that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, once the first book was actually written, I had to admit to myself that I wanted to do something with it. So of course, this was back when typing was the thing, big, honking, heavy duty typewriters. And it took months simply to type up the final draft. And then I had to admit that I was going to send it in somewhere. And very unscientifically, I went out into my living room, looked on the copyright page of my books, found some addresses, and sent in a query letter.
Interesting.
One
Go ahead.
One out of a dozen editors actually replied, send it in.
Huh.
And they promptly rejected it, but they sent me a 3-page letter of what I had done wrong and what I needed to do. And from there on, I was rolling.
Great. That's an amazing story. And I remember those days of the typewriters. I actually took a typewriting class in junior high. And I always say it was the most important class I've ever taken in my life, although I did get a B-. But as a writer, I'm very, very happy I learned. But I'm very happy not to have those big typewriters because a computer just works a lot better.
I had to take my typewriting in summer school. It wasn't in the curriculum for academic students, only for secretarial.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, one of my favorite parts of the Enola series is the mystery that is Enola's relationship with her mother, Lady Eudora Holmes. Great names here. And she's a fascinating character on a number of levels. And I'm just curious where she came from. Was she based on a historical figure or somebody you know?
She, in part, is my own mother, who was a fascinating character on many levels. My mother was an artist. She made a living by painting pet portraits for people, but her favorite thing to do was to paint watercolor flowers. And the mother in the movie is very different than the mother in the books. I love both of them, but the mother in the books is based very much on my own mother. She exercised benign neglect. She made sure I was clothed and fed, and more or less out of trouble. If it wasn't bleeding, it was okay. And I did my own thing.
As a parent, I think benign neglect is often underrated as a parenting technique. I'm curious. It's great that you based that character on your mother. I think sometimes writers don't feel that they have permission to use real life people to inspire their characters. So I just want to tell anyone who's writing or who's going to write during NaNoRiMo this year to feel free to look to those people in your lives for inspiration for your characters. But on that note, you were also working not in just real life, you were working in this fictional universe that was created by Arthur Conan Doyle's canon. And, in some ways I was thinking about it that the Enola Holmes series is a type of fan fiction. Were you at all intimidated by working in this very, very well-known series of books?
Well, by that time I had so many books under my belt that, no, I don't believe I was intimidated. If anything, I was using the Conan Doyle books as sort of a foil. They left so much room for a really feminist character that I really couldn't believe that someone else hadn't gotten there before me. Why hadn't somebody else done this before? Because Sherlock Holmes, all the stories about Sherlock Holmes simply beg for a kid sister to I'm searching for the right word, and I'm sorry, I know.
Challenge him.
Yeah, to pull his beard.
Yeah. She's a good beard puller. You did it well. I enjoy watching her in action, and so many of those lines are just perfect. They'll stay with me. Well, you know what? This is kind of a getting ready to write a novel question, and especially as we head towards National Novel Writing Month next year, or next month, and not next year. It's coming up. Sign up now. You know, you're a prolific writer. Obviously, you've written more than 50 books, and that's more than a book a year for you. I think you've been a writer for like 4 decades or so. And so I'm curious, because in NaNoRiMo, we have this ongoing conversation about how much or whether you should plan your novel, or whether you should write it by the seat of your pants, or somewhere in between. And I'm just curious, are you a planner, a pantser, or a plantser, as we call it?
Very much, I was more or less forced to write by my daydreams. Such compelling daydreams that they made me worry about myself if I was mentally ill in some way. And I thought that by offloading them, I could perhaps lessen the power that they had over me. But no, more simply crawled in to take their place. So at first, writing was more or less just something that I had to do, the way some people simply have to cook nice meals, or some people just have to look good, or whatever or some people have to be active in a sport, whatever your thing might be. Later on, it became simply the way I made a living, and that in itself was quite motivational. So by the time I could have taken a job outside the home, by the time my children were in school, I was making enough as a writer so that I knew that was what I was meant to be. And I started putting it first instead of saying it was a hobby.
I think that's very important, especially for NaNoRiMo writers as well, just to make it a priority, to make creativity a priority for the month of November at the very least, and to write your story. And I'm curious, because we do have a lot of people preparing to write their novels, and I love all the cryptograms and codes and puzzles throughout your series. And so, but they all beg the question of how much research was involved, and you also had to use Victorian vocabulary and create this Victorian world and make it accessible to the modern reader. So did you do a lot of research ahead of time?
Tremendous amount of research. Now, luckily, I was an English literature. I was an English lit major. I had read any number of Victorian novels all my life. My parents, in effect, were Victorians. My father was born in 1906, my mother in 1909. They were pretty close to being real, genuine Victorians in the way they thought and the way they spoke. A lot of the way Enola speaks is based on the way my parents spoke when I was a child. Oh, my stars and garters. I didn't think of that. That was already there. Uh-huh. My word. And yes, I researched very much, reading people's biographies, autobiographies, reading books about the Victorian era, but also getting a lot of craft projects from a place called Dover Publications, and getting the paper dolls and the stickers and the coloring books. And it was ridiculous how helpful the coloring books were, because as I colored, I internalized everything. Coal scuttles, the back of the piano, everything that the way the palm fronds were stuck in the tops of the pictures. It all just sunk in to an extent that when I started to write, I didn't have to think I was already there.
That is so interesting. You know, I've talked to authors and writers of all different levels for years and asked all sorts of questions, and I've never heard anyone say that a coloring book helped inspire their story world. So I think that that's great.
Books were adults, and they were annotated with a great deal. Well, you want me to go grab one?
Sure. Everyone, Nancy will be right back with this amazing coloring book that informs her story world. You know, we get questions like this in NaNoRiMo all the time, is how do I build this fantasy world, this fictional world that I'm going to write a novel in? And so this is like one great technique. We're seeing it in action. Nancy's going to show her coloring. I'm going to hold it up close to the camera.
Can you see? That's
Enola,
that's Enola Holmes's room.
Oh,
That's her bedroom.
that is so great. Did you give that to Netflix?
No, no, I didn't. But yeah, I have many like this, Victorian costume, Victorian, I forget, but I simply had dozens of them. Well, not
Well,
maybe dozens, but a lot.
yeah. Well, next time I'm going to choose the novel I write about based on the coloring books available to me. It sounds like a fun way to do it.
They have it on everything, Celtic, whatever, Greek, anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about talking about novel structure here. You know, the Enola Holmes series, they're basically three plot lines. There's Enola and her mom, Enola and Sherlock, and Enola finding a missing person. And so did that kind of three-act formula make writing the books easier or more challenging?
Way, way more challenging. I am not by nature a plotter. I actually never thought I would write mystery. Um, I've always been a character directed writer, and Enola is a strong character, and she took me by the nose and she just took me wherever she wanted to go. But as for braiding those three plots together, that was hard. That was a workout writing all those books.
I bet, and I'm coming from this as a non-plotter as well, so that's why I wanted to ask. I was very curious about that. It's a great formula, though. Well, you know what? As we head into National Novel Writing Month, I'm asking each of the authors we talked to today. I'm hoping that you might have a writing exercise or even just a writing prompt to impart to the young writers watching, young or old writers watching. That they can take with them to explore, much like Enola is exploring the world in order to get ready to find their novel. The novel is a missing person, maybe. Anyway, what would you give? What would you tell them?
What I've always done when I'm running dry is I've started a word ocean. And that means you take a fishbowl or something similar, and you take various scraps of paper to suit your fancy, and you choose your favorite words. And your favorite words are going to be those words that resonate with you. Not every word is going to be your favorite word. You just choose them, you write them down. That one says blossom, and I found a piece of flowery paper for it. Somewhere in here, there's one that says salamander. This one says mango. Couple more. Acacia. Tangerine.
Those are great words.
Yeah.
So, and what do you do with them then? What happens?
You write them down. You fill your ocean. This is one day's work.
Okay.
You do it for as long as you care to, and the ideas will fly out of it. They'll fly out of it like flying fish.
I see.
So it's odd. It's something unconscious.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where the ideas come from, but by choosing your favorite words and playing with them. Everything I do is based on play. It really works to play. The coloring books, the word ocean.
That's a great note to end on, Nancy, because I think that's what we try to do at NaNoRiMo is take a lot of the anguish out of writing and take a more whimsical and playful approach. And so I totally agree. There needs to be more playfulness involved in writing novels. And I really appreciate the playfulness that you've told us about and everything you've told us about Enola Holmes. So I can't wait to watch it tonight. It was so fun watching the trailer. So I know it will be fun. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, NaNoRiMo.